What is up, duelists, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. It is a new format, new ban list, new pack in Blazing Dominion. A lot of things have changed. Some things have stayed the same. Let's talk about that. I'm gonna rank the best decks in the format right now, of course, as there are a lot of decks in the format and I have just started testing with Blazing Dominion. I'm gonna try my best to give you some insight on my Nationals preparation, because German Nationals is coming up in less than 2 weeks actually, which is pretty exciting. But yeah, take it with a grain of salt. It's just my first experience with the format. If there's a deck that I'm missing that you want my opinion about, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer as many as I can. Without further ado, hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. TCG tier list time for the upcoming format. I think it's an interesting one, and I know that a lot of other people have already created tier lists. I just personally needed some extra time to start finding my way into the format. I've spent some time over the last couple of days starting to prepare for German Nationals, and I do have my first kind of like gut feeling developed on how good these individual decks are. So we're going to talk about it today. As always, of course, I haven't decided yet what kind of deck I'm going to be playing for German Nationals, even though I have narrowed it down to just a couple of deck choices, and we are going to talk about that today as well. I'm going to tell you how good I think these decks are in general, and then I'll also tell you like whether they're like something that I personally would consider bringing to an event or not. But yeah, as always, I've tried to keep this one a little bit shorter just in terms of the list of decks that I'm including, because I wanted to make sure I mainly include like the best decks in the format and a lot of the new stuff. So if there's anything missing here and you're seeing it on YouTube, then feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll try my best to answer the comments to tell you what exactly I think the position of the deck is in the format. But yeah, without further ado, these are not in any sort of order, but I do want to just mention in the beginning that I do think Cool Tune is among the best decks in the format. You're going to be surprised if you're not super familiar with the format yet. I think you're going to end up being surprised how quote-unquote beatable Cool Tune is in general. There's a couple of decks we're going to talk about today that I think have a pretty decent matchup into this deck. So Cool Tune, in my opinion, is the kind of best deck in the format that, you know, is really strong, but does have counters to it. There's a couple of decks in the metagame that are going to have a decent shot at beating Cool Tune. However, those decks are going to have other weaknesses, and we are also going to discuss those. But Cool Tune, in my opinion, is just super efficient, basically has zero chance of bricking. Like, I've spent like a few days ago, I had a couple of friends over, like Emre and Niels, and we just tried like testing for an entire day, and I think Cool Tune like bricked 0 times, maybe once on like just 5 hand traps. But the deck is super consistent, super efficient, and just going second always has the chance of just hand trapping you to death, which makes it a really strong contender in the format. But there are going to be some counters for it. All right, let's do all of the Medius lore at once, I think, just to kick things off with a bang, because these are something I have mixed feelings about different Medius lore decks. Personally, in my first impression, the best Medius lore deck by far is Doomsday. And I think Doomsday has real potential in this format. I've played this deck a little bit. I tried it into Cool Tune, and I was really impressed with Doomsday's ability for especially going second into boards. I thought it was really impressive. So whereas like, and I think Doomsday is kind of like a nice opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to the playstyle when you compare it to Cool Tune, because Cool Tune in a lot of cases, when Cool Tune goes second, your goal is like to minimize your opponent's ability to make any sort of board. You know, you just throw hand traps at them, try to stop them from playing. Doomsday is different. Doomsday lets the opponent make a board usually, and like, you know, you play a couple of board breakers, maybe Mulcharmies, maybe Droll, and you just try playing into boards with strong engine, which is a playstyle that I think resonates with a lot of people. And if you find yourself resonating with that playstyle, I think Doomsday is going to be the deck for you this format. I think it's a really strong deck in that regard. I think it has strong boards going first. You guys are right though in the chat right now. Doomsday is weak to board breakers, which I think is a legit argument against the deck. However, I do think in the current format, the board breakers that are so good against Doomsday are not necessarily the most popular ones. You know, the deck, in my experience, is pretty weak to something like Dark Ruler No More. The question is, how popular is Dark Ruler No More? At the moment, not that popular. So with Doom Z, it's kind of like this situation where the deck wants to be in this position where it's not expected to be the best deck in the format, but it is, you know, just fine, and people are not specifically preparing for it. Because as long as there's no Dark Rule, the Droplet is good against it too. But for Droplet, like, the thing with Droplet against Doom Z is you have to invest a decent amount of cards, and you still have to deal with the Doom Z trap card potentially. So, you know, I wouldn't say Droplet is an auto win against Doom Z, but Dark Ruler is really good. Anyways, I like Doom Z a lot. I think it's the best Medius deck. I think the Power Patron deck is kind of like Doom Z, but like just a little bit worse in almost any aspect. So I'm putting the Power Patron deck into niche options. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't hate it either. It is also the deck out of the 4 Medius lore decks that I have the least experience with. So maybe I'm rating it a little bit too high or too low here. But in my first impression, I just didn't really see a reason to play the Power Patron deck over the Doom Z deck, personally. It does get stronger access to certain hand traps, like you can play more Dominus cards in the Power Patron deck because you don't need the wind monsters that you need in Doom Z. But I don't think that the Dominus cards are that good of a reason to play the deck this format. Realistically, I think if you want to play a hand trap deck, there are other better options like Cool Tune. And if you want to play a board breaker deck, I think there are other better options like Doom Z or other decks that we're going to get into in a second. But I do think it's not a bad deck from what I've seen. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I'm going to put it like pretty much right in the middle. Archmage, in my least favorite or the least powerful Medius lore deck is probably Archmage, in my opinion. I don't think it's a bad deck. I wouldn't go that far. I do think it's a very capable deck. I think Archmage's biggest advantage is that the Archmage cards themselves play pretty well into Molcharmi Fualos. It is worth mentioning that the K9 version is probably the one that suffered the most from the Noroi ban out of all of the K9 variations. You know, in this deck, they did actually play 3 copies of Noroi. And this deck actually, as opposed to Vanquish Soul, which we're going to talk about later, like Vanquish Soul doesn't really care about losing Noroi, in my opinion, or at least not much, whereas Archmage does. So you're going to have to play other variations of Archmage. Although, as we're speaking right now, there is an Archmage deck in top 8 at the Greek National Championships, which is also a pretty, like, you know, sizable nationals. There's a lot of good Greek players out there. So, you know, the deck is definitely not bad. I would not say that. And the new support with the new counter trap and everything makes it good into hand trap. So maybe it's on par with the Power Patron deck, or even slightly better. It's just that I don't really think it's a great deck, this format, but it's all right, you know. Mid does not mean bad. That's that. We have another tier for that. Elf Notes, in my opinion, is around here power level wise. I just don't love the Elf Note deck. I think it's rather polarizing. I think it doesn't really, in my experience, it plays a decent amount of bricky cards, which is something that a lot of the Medius decks share, to be fair. But I think Archmage Elf Note is particularly bricky, I feel like, and the bricks in Elf Note are also harder to get value from than they are in like Doom Z, for example, in my opinion, because in Doom Z, like a hard drawn Doom Z equip spell or a hard drawn Drastea or something like that, they can turn into pretty valuable pieces if you need them for your other card effects or if you pair them well. In Elf Note, this is not really the case. If you draw the Elf Note trap, that's just straight up terrible. If you draw the Elf Note spell, your Tinea is just missing out on value. So the Elf Note hands, like, there's a lot of variance in there. There's a lot of weird cards you don't want to draw. Your deck is really strong going first if it pulls off the combo, but it's not the greatest deck at going second. I think one of the main advantages for Elf Note is that Droll Lockbird doesn't hurt it as much, I think. And you can also experiment with it a little bit and pair it with different decks. Like I've seen Elf Note branded, like Elf Note Albaz being a thing, Elf Note Fiendsmith. You know, there's a lot of room for experimentation with Elf Note. However, from what I've seen, a lot of the Elf Note decks share the same like strengths and weaknesses. I haven't seen one that was like significantly better than the others so far. Nothing that's made me want to say like, yeah, Elf Note is one of the best decks this format. I think it's just like a regular combo pile that's gonna have good games going first most of the time, struggles going second, especially into Cool Tune. So yeah, it does get the ability to play Fedralis Harmonia, but I don't think that alone catapults it above like a lot of the other decks in the format. I think really missing Baron is such a big deal for this deck because that insulates all of your combos in the OCG. Like Baron de Fleur does everything for this deck, right? It's a good board under Fuba. You would just get to Baron really quickly. You beat Nibiru really easily. Super efficient half boards with Baron involved, and it like insulates your combos. If there's no Fuba or whatever, you can just push infinitely with Baron as your like third summon or fourth summon. And like Crystal Wing is good, but Crystal Wing is just not quite as easy to get to as early. You need to spend more resources, more of your effects to get to Crystal Wing. You can get interrupted before Crystal Wing. Crystal Wing is harder to make under Fuwa. Lots of things that make Crystal Wing not as good as Baron, even though, yes, Crystal Wing is still a really good card, but it feels more like you already have to have full combo access to even make the Crystal Wing. Especially, I think Fuwa is the biggest argument for like Crystal Wing, because you need to make like multiple special summons and multiple draws into Fuwa happen before you can get that. So yeah, that's my take on the Medius decks. I think Doomsday has real potential this format. The other three, and you know me, I'm not the biggest fan of combo decks, but to me they don't seem like anything special. They're just new combo decks in the format. They're not bad. They don't do anything particularly well in my opinion though, so that's where I would put them. Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes is a deck that I've been asked about a couple of times because with Dominus Spark, you know, people often forget that not only dark decks can play Dominus Spark, but light decks can play Dominus Spark as well. So technically Blue Eyes can play a pretty interesting non-engine lineup now. We play like all the hand traps in Blue Eyes anyways, and we just add Dominus Spark and Fedralis Harmonia to the mix, which is somewhat interesting. So I thought I would include it in this one as well. However, I think Blue Eyes is just lacking in the it's just lacking in the power department. Like your board is just going to be extremely weak going first a lot of the times. Dominus Spark also does not allow you to play Primite cards, which is probably the reason to play Blue Eyes. So realistically, you can't play Spark if you want to play Primite. You can play Harmonia either way, but even Harmonia actually has downsides in Blue Eyes because you cannot use Spirit's effect, which is going to make some of your hands a lot weaker. And it's just, I think right now is a bad time to be playing a full-on hand trap deck that isn't Cool Tune, because it's just hard to stop some of these decks completely from setting up a board. And Blue Eyes loses to every single half board in the game. Cool Tune is not the best deck into half boards either, but it does have serious pushes into half boards. You know, you have Rotary for extra normal summons. You have Q that gets 2 bodies on the board immediately. You can synchro from hand, so if they cut you off of some bodies, that's not the biggest deal. And you have significantly less bricks in a Cool Tune deck. So essentially, Blue Eyes is just a much worse version of Cool Tune in basically every single sense. So I wouldn't recommend Blue Eyes. Clown Crew. This deck, and it's gonna pain me to say it so much, this deck's mid. I love the concept of this deck. Everyone who's looked at this deck knows that this is a Josh deck. You draw a bunch of cards. You do a lot of cool stuff in this deck. Unfortunately, I think it's just not the time, not the place for this deck. It's not even consistent enough to the point where I would say, yeah, at least it's got that going for it, because there is still a lot of hand traps that are really good against the Clown Crew deck. You know, your summon spells can get hit with Impulse. They can remove your bodies off the field with Spark, because you always play into Spark because you trigger the graveyard effects of your stuff. You get Omega destroyed by Droll Lockbird, which is a really big problem for this deck. It's a problem for a lot of decks in general, but when you're already playing a low ceiling grindy deck that relies on drawing cards to even function, Droll Lockbird is completely going to ruin your day, whether you're going first or going second. There is some potential for hybrid variations. You know, people have asked me about, like, what about Clown Crew Mitsurugi? What about Clown Crew Runic? Realistically, Clown Crew Mitsurugi can work. That is a functioning concept. However, I think you are just much worse off than just playing a pure Mitsurugi deck. Like, your deck is just going to lose to Droll Lockbird even harder. And realistically speaking, you're not really adding much quality to a Mitsurugi deck, because we're going to talk about Mitsurugi next. But Mitsurugi has access to some of the most disgusting non-engine in the game right now. you're basically a Mitsurugi deck is already 40 really good cards. Whatever you take out of a Mitsurugi deck to fit Clown Crew cards doesn't even necessarily make your deck stronger. You even have to give up Dominus Impulse if you want to play Clown Crew cards because they're lights. So yeah, Clown Crew unfortunately is mid. This is something that could change in the future for multiple reasons. Droll and Lockbird could get banned at some point, Copium, then Clown Crew would be more viable. They get new support, which definitely helps. That could help them be more viable. And the format dynamic could change in general. Maybe there's a world in which this deck can come back. I do think, I mean, come back, it just came out. But I think it's a solid concept that just doesn't work right now. But I'm gonna have an eye on Clown Crew. I love that deck, and maybe at some point I'm gonna whip out the clowns. I mean, I'm gonna try it anyways. I'm gonna bring this deck to locals anyways soon and record it, and you'll see my experience. But like, I don't expect it to do incredibly well. But yeah. Mitsurugi is a good pick this format. There's not much else to say about it other than it does get to play the best non-engine in the game. You can play Ash Blossom, Fuwa if you want to play Fuwa. You can play Droll, you can play Dominus Impulse, Dominus Spark, and Phydraulis Harmonia. Pair that if you want more non-engine, throw in Imperm as well. You have Dimension Shifter access. This deck has the most disgusting non-engine in the game pretty much. Even more disgusting than Malice, because you can play Phydraulis Harmonia while Malice cannot. So non-engine wise, pure Mitsurugi is probably the best deck in the format. The only issue I have with Mitsurugi is that it does struggle with bricking a little bit. And I think that is an issue that is exaggerated when Cool Tune is the best deck in the format, because you can't really reliably increase the number of starters in your deck. Like more copies of Aramasas or Manjus or whatever are not really going to increase your consistency all the time, because Cool Tune plays cards like Valor and Imperm, and they play Bell usually, which covers some of your starters as well, like Pre-Prep and Prayers. It's difficult to consistently play versus Cool Tune decks. So yeah, that's tough. And it's just, you're at this crossroad of like, where do I go with Mitsurugi? Do I play board breakers, or do I make use of the access to really broken hand traps that I can use in Mitsurugi? Or do I play more consistency cards to make sure I can play the game? And I just feel like being caught up in the decision-making process there, it gives you a lot of options on where you can take the deck, but ultimately, no matter what you do with it, it's going to be a really good pick this format, but it also is going to have an issue somewhere. Like if you go really heavy on engine, like you add in like Azamina cards and so on and so forth, you're going to be weaker going second. You're going to be weaker into Droll and Lockbird. If you go the direction of more board breakers, you're going to be better into Cool Tune, but you're going to be worse into the combo decks in the format, except for Doom Z, depending on what kind of breakers you use. And if you go into the direction of playing all of the broken hand traps, then you're good into the combo decks, but you might struggle to prevent like getting hand trapped to death by Cool Tune, because they just see your hand, they see 3 hand traps, 1 maybe Kusanagi or whatever, or a mirror or something, 1 or 2 starters, and they're just going to focus their energy on hitting the starters, and then you can't really play the game. So it's an interesting position for Mitsurugi, but I do think it's a pretty good choice. My gut feeling is that it's going to end up a little bit worse than Doomsy, but it's a good deck. All right, then we have Lunalight. Lunalight is demoted to mid or niche option, in my opinion, which is interesting because it's been a really good deck for multiple formats now, and it hasn't really received a hit, which I think is crazy. I think it's crazy that Baguska has survived until now. Baguska has survived all the way through Ryziel format, and I think banning Baguska was such a elegant way to hit Lunalight without actually hitting Lunalight cards. But they didn't do it, so it technically still has access to Baguska, which is a good card against Cool Tune. The problem is the amount of hand traps in the format right now, which just, Lunalight is the kind of deck that is really dependent on the format, the surroundings, and the Cool Tune matchup is really, really hard for this deck. You have Clip and Crackle to worry about. This is like the one deck on this list that actually cares about Crackle, which is rough, but also Cool Tune is a deck that can out Liger Dancers, which is even bigger of a problem for Lunalight, because you could argue like, oh, well, yeah, there's been hand trap heavy decks in the format in the past, but at least if you struggled through like 3 hand traps, you still made 1 Liger, you would still win the game. Not the case against Cool Tune, because Cool Tune can actually make RS that's big enough to attack over Liger. So you're not even guaranteed to win the game if Liger hits the board against Cool Tune, so that's tough. Doom Z can also out Ligers, depending on the version. So, and Mitsurugi also is not the worst time into Lunalight. So Lunalight really struggles from losing a couple of its good matchups and good hand traps being in the game against it. How does Doomsy out Liger? I've seen versions where they played the new... It's a common from Blazing Dominion that you can just put onto another XYZ and it like buffs your Exceed monsters in the battle phase. So there's that. But then there's also... They try to like make the Jupredo bigger and stuff like that. So there's a Idris Feel, something like that, yeah. There's ways. People have been playing Dugaris in Doomsy as well because they can go for some sneaky OTK lines under Forbidden Crown. And those are all ways to increase attack points past a Liger Dancer, so yeah. And also, Draco Tail is gone, which was one of your better matchups for Lunalight. Yami has been hit significantly, so a couple of your really good matchups are simply not there anymore, and the stuff that remains is all usually matchups that can out Liger Dancer. So I think Lunalight really struggles. It might even end up being here. But that's the thing, the lower Lunalight falls, the more people disrespect it, the higher there's a chance that it could come back. So I don't feel comfortable demoting it to mid yet. I would say it's still a niche option in the right environment for this format. You know, if people end up not respecting it, maybe there's a world where you can still play it. Magnet Warriors. Magnet Warriors in the TCG is a completely different story from Magnet Warriors in Master Duel. We actually just witnessed Magnet Warriors win a Challenger Cup in Master Duel. The problem is the version of the deck is completely different in TCG. Compared to Master Duel, we don't have Baron, we don't have Block Dragon, we don't have Barrier Statue of the Drought. So a lot of the things that Magnet Warrior can do in Master Duel, they can't do in the TCG. The deck is capable, let's say it like that. It's not a bad deck by any means. You're basically forced into the Fiendsmith route though, and I think Fiendsmith in general is not the highest value engine in this upcoming format. There's going to be a couple of decks that are weak into Mitsurugi, like weak into Fiendsmith, like Mitsurugi. But decks like Doom Z and Cool Tune don't care about Caesar that much. And I think as a result of that, you're going to have a tough time into those matchups because your board is breakable with Magnet Warriors if your opponent's deck does not really care about value, about wave hiking Caesar. I don't think that deck is great. I mean, I think one advantage for this deck could be that I do think there's going to be less Fuwas in the format. I think Fuwa is going to be still main decked a decent amount. I mean, we're going to talk about non-engine in a future stream as well. I'm going to give you guys my opinion on non-engine right now. But I do think the Fuwa stocks are down a little bit this format. I've definitely seen people cut Fuwalos from their decks. Depending on what they were playing, they were moving them to the side decks. This is something that's good for Magnets. They don't like being up against Fuwalos. But other than that, I don't really see a huge reason to play the Magnet Warrior deck right now. All right. Red Dragon Archfiend. Red Dragon Archfiend is a deck that I've looked into very briefly because I was looking into other decks that could potentially play the non-engine lineup of Dominus Spark, Dominus Impulse, and Phydraulis Harmonia. And Red Dragon Archfiend did come up when I discussed this with a couple of friends. It's not a bad deck, but it is also not particularly good at anything except for the fact that it gets to play Impulse, Spark, and Harmonia, which is a good non-engine lineup, but alone, I don't believe in it enough. You know, I will say this was mostly done based off of theory. I looked into the cards, I looked into what the deck can do, and I reached a conclusion that I think at the moment it still is a mid deck. But I do think it does get more support when we get the rival overframes eventually, the Grandmaster rares, which is not even going to be in Magnificent Monsters, I believe, because that's the rival cards. And we get the protagonist cards in Magnificent Monsters. So it's going to be a while. But the overframe is pretty good for this, I think. Jesse showcased Elf Node, Red Dragon Archfiend on his channel. I mean, yeah, but that's I don't really think that classifies as a full-on Red Dragon Archfiend deck. Maybe the engine could be interesting maybe in other decks. I've seen people mess around with like Vision Resonator in other decks. I'm talking the pure Red Dragon Archfiend deck though, and I think that's mid until we get the overframe. Okay. Sky Striker. This is one of the decks that I'm considering for German Nationals with, I mean, to no one's surprise. The other decks I'm considering right now are like, I'm thinking about playing Cool Tune, Out of the decks we've rated so far, I could see myself playing Cool Tune. I could see myself playing Doom Z. I can definitely see myself playing Sky Striker. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Sky Striker is the best deck in the format. I don't think it is that. It has too many weaknesses to be that. I do think it classifies as a good pick, though. I think the main advantage, of course, is that it has a really good matchup into Cool Tune. And that is something that in my testing so far that I've done for the new format has been true. I've had a really good time into Cool Tune. You simply break the Cool Tune board most of the time and you outgrind Cool Tune all of the time. As long as you can get into a grind game against Cool Tune, you win. And this is especially true since they banned Rose Whip. That's a good point. Before Rose Whip, this matchup was hard. After Rose Whip, it is a good matchup for you. You do struggle into some other decks in the format. You know, Doom Z is a relatively coin flippy matchup. And even when you go first, honestly, it can be pretty rough because Doom Z is really good into boards. Sometimes, low-key, it might be better to go second against Doom Z because the Doom Z board is breakable. But when they play into your board, they like destroy all your stuff. Mitsurugi is not the easiest matchup for Sky Striker. Some other combo decks like Elf Notes, if they go first against you, they're going to be hard to break. So Striker struggles into the combo half of the board, the field. It's really good into Cool Tune, but even into Cool Tune, there's a caveat. Cool Tune plays Ash Blossom, Cool Tune plays Bell, Cool Tune often plays Droll and Lockbird. Those cards are all really good against Sky Striker, and especially if they draw multiple of them, it's really hard sometimes, even against Cool Tune, which is supposed to be your good matchup. They can, instead of summoning Rose Whip, they just tutor out Ash Blossom a lot of the time now, so they have like the Ash Blossom guaranteed in their hand. So if they draw Droll and Lockbird or Bell, or if they draw Ash and then tutor out the Bell instead, you have a really hard time because they got Ash and Bell in hand then, or Ash and Droll, or Bell and Droll, or Ash and whatever, you know, it can be hard. The Doom Z trap is rough. You do need to draw an out to it, and if they protect it with the utopic future and you can't even target it to like with Fallen and the Virtuous, it's rough. So I'm not quite sure yet if I like Sky Striker enough to actually bring it to German Nationals. I would love to. It's been solid in my testing. It is a good pick. I'm just not sure if I'm confident enough into the combo decks to actually play it, but it is a good option for sure. Okay, yummy iterations. It's funny to me because I feel like limiting Cupsy Yummy basically hurts pure Yummy the most, which has just been the most fair version of Yummy since its introduction, which is unfortunate. I think Yummy hybrids are still something that you could see people do. It does have a hard time into Cool Tune. It depends really, like, because going first, I think you're fine because Cool Tune is a hand trap deck and Yummy historically does really well into hand traps. At the same time, Yummy did lose its best starter into hand traps, which is Cupsy. You only have one copy now. I would say Yummy is like a niche option that I wouldn't be surprised. Let's just say it like that. I don't have a Yummy deck on my mind right now that I would think is like immediately gonna be good. My main issue is Fiendsmith Yummy. Also, like the C's are once again not the greatest into Cool Tune and Doom Z. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone next week just shows up and has discovered a new way to splash Yummy into whatever, man. I don't know. And just does Yummy combo again. Like, I would not be surprised if that happens. So, you know, I've called Yummy bad on previous discussions after ban lists, and I was wrong then because, you know, they found new ways to play it. And I mean, yeah, at this point, I wouldn't expect pure Yummy to do anything because, like, without Arclight, the end board is bad, and without Cupsy Yummy, or with one Cupsy Yummy, you don't even have great enough starters anymore because Piri Rise Map doesn't really count in my mind because Piri Rise Map is terrible into Droll, and Piri Rise Map also loses to Ash Blossom, which Cupsy Yummy was one of the best cards into Ash Blossom because it basically didn't lose to it at all, and replacing it with Piri Rise Map just doesn't quite work. And yeah, in general, I just think with one Cupsy Yummy, the deck suffers way too much. Draco Tail? Draco Tail is completely and utterly dead, okay? Draco Tail has been absolutely slaughtered, done as dirty as it could have been. It's been completely destroyed for the sins of White Albaz. Do not play this deck. It doesn't even have a resemblance of grind game anymore with one of each spell card. You run out of targets for your Draco Tail effects on turn 1. this deck does not make sense. The entire Draco Tail archetype has fallen apart. Okay, it's legit. Like, even though in theory you can still build a Draco Tail deck and try to mess around with it, realistically there is zero reason to play this archetype now. Which is gonna make some people really happy because some people really hated Draco Tail. I personally think it's a little bit overdone. I think it's a little crazy that they murdered Draco Tail this hard when Yummy and K9 are basically still alive. I mean, we're gonna talk about K9 later. But yeah, no, branded Draco Tail in general is, there's no way it's playable. There's just no way it's any good. Eniacraft. Eniacraft is one of those really fun niche rogue decks that I think you could do well with at some point if you just like hit enough people that don't know exactly what's going on. I think in theory, if your opponent knows exactly what's going on, Eniacraft shouldn't really be working. At the same time, you do lose one of your harder matchups in Draco Tail. That was a pretty hard matchup. It is funny to me that now that they printed a Draco Tail counter in Blazing Dominion for Eniacraft, right? I think it, and there's the new big Eniacraft is basically there just so that the Draco Tail doesn't destroy Eniacraft. That's why they made it. However, Draco Tail is now dead anyways. So your biggest enemy with Eniacraft is now probably Mitsurugi. Mitsurugi has always been terrifying for Eniacraft because of Murakumo being chain blocked. The new Spider can stop that sometimes, but it is hard to set that up immediately, especially going second when the Murakumo is ready to go immediately. That's hard. But it's not the worst, actually. I think Eniacraft's not the worst. I'm still gonna rank it as mid. Maybe it's even the niche option for the right moment. I'd have to see how good it is into Cool Tune. I could imagine this matchup actually being good for Eniacraft. The Cool Tune matchup could actually be decent. I'd have to try it. It's not bad, but I have my issues ranking it higher because I feel like Eniacraft is the type of deck that has a really hard time actually becoming meta. Because as soon as it becomes meta and people understand how the deck works, like I think it does have some knowledge checks. Peeps is in chat right now who's played Eniacraft, who's saying like the deck is more like a matchup dependent than knowledge dependent. I think it's both, because like, yeah, it's gonna have some matchups that are gonna feel really good, but it's also gonna have some matchups that, or a lot of matchups, which the matchup, or rather, let's phrase it like this, right? The matchups become bad if your opponent understands your deck, a lot of them. And I think that's true for multiple matchups here, except for maybe Cool Tune. And I think that's rough. That's a rough position to be in. Because you might be farming all the Cool Tunes, but then if all the other matchups are kind of ass, if your opponents know what they're doing, like that's not an ideal spot to be in. I do really appreciate the addition of a new small Eniacraft, though, for additional consistency. At the same time, another thing, Roll and Lockbird is still legal, so enjoy that. It doesn't matter how good your matchup is. If you get rolled in Eniacraft, your deck does not play Yu-Gi-Oh! So, yeah. Fairy Tail. With the introduction of Fairy Tail Snow back into the format, I do think Fairy Tail is getting a little bit better. I mean, to be fair, I think Fairy Tail Snow is not even the most important, not the most important card in the deck, but it does help. And I've even seen people mess around with the new TCG exclusive. I don't know how much I love that. I think the Fairy Tail deck is a niche option. I wouldn't say it's a good deck, but it's definitely not mid. I've experimented with it just a little bit to see some of the potential. I think it's a scary combo deck. You know, it's got a crazy Omni-Negate baked in onto the level 4 fusion monster, the new secret rare. Just being an Omni-Negate by banishing a Fairy Tail is crazy. And I actually don't think it's a bad deck. I have to play it more to see if it's more than just a regular combo pile. But it's a real deck. I don't think it's one of the best decks in the format, but it's not bad. It's also quite decent going second. I think it's better than Elf Notes. That is possible. It's just, for me, basically, I have more experience with and against Elf Notes and the Power Patron deck than with Fairy Tales. So I'm just kind of throwing it right in the middle because I'm just going off of my first impression. I don't want to rate it too highly or too poorly just because I haven't played it enough yet. But I have looked into it. It looks solid. I want to try it to see how good it exactly is, but it definitely is a playable deck in my opinion. But yeah, okay. Malice has definitely not died with White Rabbit going from 2 to 1. I do think Malice is weaker now than it was before for two reasons. Number one, little bit lower consistency without the second White Rabbit, which does matter, but you can replace that consistency with other cards. There is one other thing that has gotten weaker about Malice, which is that one White Rabbit in rotation actually does matter beyond consistency sometimes, because the typical lines for Malice are like, well, I'm going to use a White Rabbit on turn 1, and then on my opponent's turn, I'm going to use like March Hare in hand, banish Red Ransom from the grave, and that Red Ransom is then going to banish the second White Rabbit from your deck to get the MTP07. I don't think that really matters though, because you can just shuffle back White Rabbit with Cryptor and then do that. I think Malice is still completely viable, and it does gain access to Dominus Spark, so it just can't possibly be a bad deck this format. I think the main downside for Malice is actually its matchup into some of the decks in the format. Like, I just think historically Malice has not done well into hand traps, and it's even less good into hand traps now that it loses another starter. So I think it's just gonna struggle into like Cool Tune. I still think it is probably at the top of this for me. This might be influenced by my hatred for it. Maybe it's gonna end up being better than that once again. This is more so wishful thinking. Like, I'm trying to think of reasons. And I realistically, I do think, like, if you want to play a combo deck, you're probably better off playing Doom Z. And if you want to play a deck with Spark and Impulse, you might as well play Mitsurugi. But that's just my perspective. I think people are going to disagree with that. People are still going to play Malice, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up performing about the same as Mitsurugi. So actually, yeah, no, I think these two are in like relatively similar spots in terms of quality. So I'll give Malice the benefit of the doubt, as much as I hate it, and put it up here. So yeah. Orchist. Orchist is a deck that in theory should be better than Malice, because it's technically more consistent, but it doesn't draw cards, I guess. I think Orchist goes around here. I don't think it's a bad deck by any means. Once again, it's another deck that benefits from Dominus Spark existing, and it's just a solid mid-rangey combo-y deck. You know, it's gonna have good turn 1 boards. It plays decent into Droll and Lockbird. It has good non-engine. There's nothing wrong with playing Orchist this upcoming format. I think it's a little bit weak going second compared to some other decks in the format. Like, yes, it gets good non-engine, but if you compare these decks, like if you compare Orchist to Mitsurugi, for example, the Mitsurugi engine plays significantly better into boards going second than an Orchist engine. Orchist is just more normal summon reliant, weaker to removal on the normal summon and stuff like that. Mitsurugi doesn't have that problem. Other than that, I think these two are relatively similar. This one's better into Droll. This one's better going second, and I think better going second is slightly more valuable than better into Droll, but Orchist is a solid deck. And here's the surprise winner of the last ban list, and that is Branded. Branded is a deck that's been coming up a lot before the ban list. It's been putting up surprisingly good results. I mean, not surprising necessarily, because I have played the deck myself as well, and I did notice that it was a strong deck. I think it was a really good deck before the ban list, and even though Branded Fusion went to 1, I think Branded benefited from this ban list, and I would actually say Branded is here to rival Cool Tune for the best deck in the format. Maybe, just maybe, it even is better than Cool Tune. I'm not sure about that, but this is a deck I've been testing. I've been enjoying it a lot. I am considering it for German Nationals. It's basically those 4 decks up here that I am currently considering for German Nationals in my current situation, with where I'm at with my testing. And Branded has been performing well for me. Reason number 1, the Cool Tune matchup is good. And the reason why the Cool Tune matchup is good is because your engine simply outgrinds Cool Tune. The hand traps that Cool Tune has are not bad against Branded by any means, but you just load up your graveyard with strong end phase effects. You throw your entire hand at the Cool Tune board. You don't even have to break it. As long as you can get out all of their interruptions, force them to use all of their stuff, you move into end phase, you move into your main phase 3, and you create all of your follow-up. You take apart the end board like Titanic Clad, summon Albaz, and end phase. They can't negate it with RS. You just fuse their board away. You get your Mirror Jade. Albion sets your Fallen and the Virtuous. Cool Tune isn't playing through that on turn 3 because they don't have the strongest follow-up in the game. Like, as long as you can play into the Cool Tune board, you are winning against Cool Tune. So the one weakness that Branded has, in my opinion, in this format is consistency. And I'm not just talking about the raw, like, chance of drawing a starter, but like the chance of drawing a resilient hand into hand traps. Because you do need, in a format with Cool Tune, you do need to draw multiple engine cards for in order to be able to play guaranteed into hands like Veiler, Ash, Imperm, Bell, and so on and so forth. And I think that's Brandon's problem, because if you hard draw Fallen of White, you got no problem. Like, you're set, you're good to go, right? Because you get guaranteed value, sending a fusion for cost, even if they Imperm it or even if they Veiler it, like, doesn't matter. But beyond that, you have a lot of like really vulnerable starters, right? Like, you need to play like Alubers, which can get Impermed or Veilered. You need to play Nadir Servant, which has a pretty heavy drawback. And I think if you don't play those cards, your deck is just not consistent enough. But if you play those cards, then your deck is really tight. You don't have as much non-engine space. And then also, we haven't even talked about maybe even bigger problems sometimes, which is the amount of like engine requirements you need to play. So there's a huge like discrepancy between the good Branded hands and the bad Branded hands, because sometimes you draw Fallen of White, Fallen and the Virtuous, Droplet, Super Poly going second, and sometimes you draw Mercurier, Golden Sword Soul, Ecclesia, whatever. Like, you don't have to play all of those. Tribrigade, Spring and Skid. You don't have to play all of those, but you have to play some amount. And if you draw too many of them, your hands just go from being incredibly resilient to interruption to being super vulnerable to it. And your opponent is going to know this if they're playing Cool Tune, right? They're going to look at your hand, they're going to see a couple of engine requirements, and that's going to make it so much easier for them to plan out their turn to like interrupt you. And so basically what I'm saying is the deck is looking really good, but I have noticed some issues when I was testing it. And I'm currently trying to fix those issues. I'm trying to make the deck more consistent. I'm trying to add more pushes into it. I'm trying to make it play less engine requirements. If I can make that work, then I think it's going to have a really good standing in the format. If not, then it's a good deck either way. It's just going to have these awkward hands, which I'm not sure if I want to play it that way. But it's definitely a force to be reckoned with, and it grinds really, really well into the format. It's got a good Sky Striker matchup. It's maybe the one deck in the format that actually outgrinds Sky Striker, especially if Striker doesn't play Shark Cannon. It's a really scary matchup for Sky Striker. Every other deck gets outgrinded by Sky Striker easily, but Branded does not. So yeah, Branded is in a pretty good spot, surprisingly. I did not expect it to walk away as one of the biggest winners of the ban list, but I think it did. Okay, Radiant Typhoon. Mid. Radiant Typhoon, very mid now. One chant was a crazy hit to the deck for multiple reasons. You might think like, oh, just replace the chant with Fire Formation Tenki or Shield Bearer. That's not gonna happen, or it's gonna happen. You can technically do that. The deck technically works if you do that. However, it has more, and of course, the obvious reason is like Droll and Lockbird destroys you when you play those cards, but there is more to it. Like, Radiant Typhoon was already a deck with a low amount of starters, so Ash Blossom was already really good into it. But if they ashed your chant, at least you could activate your Crocea. So chant plus Crocea was a really good situation to be in, because you would just go draw phase, chant, and if they ash that, you get Crocea. You can't Crocea if they ash your Tenki. You can't Crocea if they ash your Shield Bearer. That doesn't work, and that eliminates your ability to play through Droll, your ability to play in the draw phase in general, and your ability to play through Ash Blossom. And all of that in a deck that was already pretty fair to begin with. Like, Radiant Typhoon was already one of the lower ceiling decks in the format, one of the more grindy approaches to it. And I think it's just not worth to play anymore. Like, it's not a bad deck by any means. It technically still works. It technically still has good grind game, solid boards, and everything like that. I just don't see a reason to play this deck over any of the other decks up here, because it was, realistically, even with 3 copies of Chant, I probably would not have rated it much higher. Like, I probably would have put it like here or something like that. or here, maybe slightly better than Lunalight, or but with one copy of Chant. Like even this deck just suffered for no reason, in my opinion. It's unfortunate. Then we've got Predaplants, which is an interesting deck that got some support in Blazing Dominion with the new secret rare. I forgot its name. The circular for plants and dragons, basically. Pretty interesting card, and also super duper polymerization and some other new Predaplants make the deck an interesting combo deck in the format. Mainly, it once again is another entirely made out of darks. So you can play Dominus Impulse and Dominus Spark if you want to. I have looked into this deck just a little bit, and to my impression, this deck is just essentially a completely fine but doing nothing crazy combo deck in the format. It's not bad. I do not think the deck is bad. I do think it has potential. I think it has strong boards, but it's just, to me, it just feels like a classic combo deck that is going to settle down in like the low tier 2 of the format. Absolutely playable. Absolutely could see people topping like regionals with it. Someone who's going to really learn all the combo lines is probably going to be able to do well with it on a regional level. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's also nothing super great about it. It's just a solid combo deck. If you learn your lines with it, if you don't get Fuwad a lot, then you're fine. And you're going to have the benefit of people don't really know how to interrupt it and stuff like that. Preda Primitive is a crazy starter as well in the new pack. So solid deck by any means. Try it if you really want to learn a new combo deck for the format, but I don't think it's better than like Elf Note or Power Patron. Maybe it's on par with Fairy Tail. Maybe it's like they're close to each other, I think. So yeah, it's all right. And then we've got Vanquish Soul K9. Vanquish Soul K9 is an interesting discussion point because, I mean, of course, the K9 Noroi ban is a pretty polarizing one, because some people say it's a good hit because Noroi is a toxic card because it looks at hand, which I understand. I think that's fair enough. And on the other hand, the most prominent K9 deck was K9 Vanquish Soul, and K9 Vanquish Soul played one Ripper maximum, and honestly, there was even versions without it. The one thing that K9 Vanquish Soul can no longer do because Noroi is banned is there's no longer a super clean Saryuja line, depending on how you start. Because Noroi was kind of necessary for that sometimes to get enough bodies on the board without Noroi. Did I say Ripper again? Dude, I keep mixing up Ripper and Noroi. See, it's so ingrained into my head that Ripper is the card that should have been banned. Anyways, Vanquish Soul K9, as a result of the Noroi ban, in my opinion, is by far the most viable K9 deck because it is the K9 deck that cared about Noroi the least. So I think Vanquish Soul is viable. I'd rank it somewhere around here. Maybe even slightly better than that. I think it has a solid interaction with Cool Tune because, I mean, like, the problem with Vanquish Soul against Cool Tune is that it's very go first centric. Like, Vanquish Soul sometimes passes to 1 imperm, sometimes plays through 4 hand traps because Ripper is still a thing. So it's very polarizing in that sense. Going second, you're going to have a tough time because your deck is a little bricky. Your opponent is going to see your hand, and they're going to know exactly if they can Valor your Raisin or if you have a Borger to dodge it, and so on and so forth. So if your opponent just like plays optimally into your hand, then Cool Tune is going to win going first. So it's a pretty coin flippy matchup. The branded matchup for the deck is also very polarizing. If you go first, you have a good time. If you go second, you have a bad time. And the same is true against most of the combo decks in the format. So it's just a really coin flippy deck in this format, I think. And it is a little bit bricky on top of that. But once again, it does have some great options still available. You still have, I mean, the K9 cards are still strong. The Vanquish Soul cards are still strong. You still got some real, I think I would still play this deck before I would play Elf Notes personally. So I'm putting it about here. And you'll notice I'm putting a lot of decks like right in the middle of like deck. I think that's the thing with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, this has been the case for a bunch of years now. We always have a lot of playable decks in the format that are not bad, but also not great. And this is just another one of those formats. Like, none of these decks in the middle here are dead or bad by any means. Even the decks here in mid could very well top a regional. In fact, some of these decks already have top regionals. You know, Clown Crew, we've seen regional deck profiles already, Enya Craft. All of these decks are completely fine. Like, I'm basically just evaluating these decks at the top of the competitive level, like which there's small differences between these decks, but realistically a lot of these decks are completely fine. I'm aware that I haven't included every single deck into this discussion. That's either because I don't think they're good or because I haven't looked into them enough. So this is something that you feel free to ask me in the comments of the YouTube video on what I think about your deck that you're planning to play. I'll try my best to answer as many as I can, but also keep in mind, you know, I haven't play tested every single deck from Blazing Dominion. That, like, for example, you guys are asking about the train deck. I haven't tried the train deck yet from Blazing Dominion. I haven't tried pure GMX. Haven't been able to do that yet because the set hasn't come out. Like, it's been out for like 1.5 weeks. So, you know, I need some time to take all that information in. And so this is the info I have right now. These are the decks I've tried a little bit so far, and this is how I feel about the format, which I think isn't that far off from what a lot of other people have been saying about the format. I think it's, for the most part, what everyone expects, but just a little bit of basically insight of what my first testing has resulted in for this upcoming format. So yeah, for me personally, I mean, it's not hard for you guys to guess that which kind of decks I'm going to be looking into for German Nationals. You know, I'm a big fan of the branded deck, big fan of Sky Striker. Doomsy and Cool Tune maybe a little bit less up my alley. I mean, Cool Tune is kind of mid-rangey, so I could see myself playing that too. I'm just not typically a big fan of just all hand trap decks, but you know, it is a good deck. It's an option. Doomsy is probably the most off Josh pick of this top 4 basically, but I was really positively surprised by Doomsy when I play tested it, so maybe it's going to be Doomsy. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. All right. Well, if you watch this on YouTube, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments down below and make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you next time, Duelists. Bye-bye.